Kia ora, talofa namaste, haere mai, and welcome to the Nichecache. This is our weekly podcast where we go deep into Aotearoa sporting matters. Usually, we deliver this podcast with we've always got the lo-fi ting going on. We're just out here doing our best, grounding in the mother nature of Aotearoa, and then emerging to offer some Aotearoa sporting insights. So there's always a tinge of light, a tinge of positivity. This week, we're not in the shadows right now. I think we've emerged from the shadows, but we do need to respect the darkness. We do need to respect the mystical forces that were at play at Mount Smart Stadium last weekend, because we had the biggest crowd of the Auckland FC debut season. And I was big up in the chance of 30,000 people for the Auckland FC game. They came closer than I even expected. I even thought. I was throwing out the 30,000 figure. I was like, surely they're not going to hit 30,000, which is the magical mark, the majestic mark for Mount Smart Stadium. For anyone keeping track, according to ozstadiums.com, the only time, since 2003, the only time there has been a crowd of 30,000 at Mount Smart Stadium was for the 2017 Rugby League World Cup semi-final between Tonga and England. So that's why 30,000 is the majestical mark for Mount Smart. Auckland FC, they came close, 29,100. So they had their biggest crowd of the season. The Warriors, they had their biggest crowd of the season, 26,500. Auckland FC, they're in the finals. The Warriors coming back to Mount Smart after 3 wins in a row in Australia. Back-to-back days. In my mind, I was framing this as another example, the best example of Mount Smart Stadium being the home of Aotearoa sport. But they both lost. Auckland FC lost to Melbourne Victory. The Warriors lost to the Raiders. And there's a few other things that I want to touch on as far as the bad juju, the mystical forces, respecting the darkness of what went down at Mount Smart Stadium. But ultimately, both teams had their biggest crowds of the season. Both teams lost, and it was a bummer. So we are here to respect the darkness, respect the shadow, respect the voodoo, because as our mindfulness reminds us every week, there's nothing we can do about it for starters. But sometimes you just need to respect the darkness. And with that in mind, I'm curious, do you have a mindfulness this week that is in tune with that, aligned with that? Or are you going to take us out of that space with an uplifting message of light, love, and positivity?
I might be doing both. I was thinking, because we talked about this a little bit before, like this was this was going to be the theme, and I wasn't, I don't know exactly 100% which angle to take with the darkness, but I was thinking darkness, how are we going to go with this? And the first thing I looked up was maybe there's time for one more Gandalf quote here. I didn't go in that direction. I thought about it. I decided not to in that, because I was looking at those ones and thinking, maybe I'm thinking less about darkness and more about shadows. And then I'm thinking, well, if it's shadows, got to be Carl Jung, the master of the shadows there. So I went down that path and found a Carl Jung quote. Carl Gustav Jung, the doctor. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, which I interpret as, you don't fight darkness with darkness, but you also don't fight darkness with the light. You fight darkness by bringing the darkness into the light, by transforming the darkness, which maybe, I don't know, in a metaphorical sense, maybe that's just about like flick the switch, you know?
Yeah.
Change the light bulb, flick the switch, get your flashlight going on your phone. I don't know, but um, you don't, yeah, you don't have to battle the darkness head on. You transform the darkness out of being darkness, I think.
But that's what we're doing. We're bringing the darkness to
Yeah.
light. We are bringing consciousness to the darkness. And to be honest, we're kind of showing a bit of comfort, a little bit of willingness to be in the darkness after a somber weekend of Auckland FC and Warriors results. I've got like a few different things. Like on my mind, I was thinking I do big up Mount Smart Stadium for, well, they just have bigger crowds than Eden Park. Like there's no Super Rugby game that gets a crowd as big as Auckland FC or the Warriors. And I think Mount Smart is the home of Auckland sport right now. But I don't have these kind of painful moments for games at Eden Park because the All Blacks don't really lose there. I don't feel like the Blues might lose there. There's no dreaded pain that I feel. The Football Ferns beat Norway at Eden Park before they lost to the Philippines. I think that was in Wellington. And the most bummed I've been about a New Zealand sports event prior to Auckland FC's loss was the Football Ferns losing to the Philippines. And that got me thinking something about how I just hate watching losing football. There's nothing worse than watching a game of football. Of course, there's always the chance you get a late goal and something crazy happens, but football seems like the sport for me where if you're losing in the last 10 minutes, you can kind of sense that you're going to lose. And in football, there are many more ways to slow the game down to waste time. So then it just compounds and it gets incredibly frustrating. So I think that's why I feel the most pain when I'm watching a football team lose. And I feel like Mount Smart has given me the highs and the lows, whereas another stadium like Eden Park, it just kind of hums along and I don't necessarily have those painful moments of Kiwi sporting fandom at Eden Park. And obviously there's a lot of other stadiums around Aotearoa, but I can't think off the top of my head any kind of emotional feeling for those stadiums. So I guess with that in mind, I'm shout out Eden Park, you know. You don't hurt me like Mount Smart Stadium. And the one thing I was thinking about that summed up the darkness at Mount Smart Stadium, the voodoo. Even the Warriors were respecting the darkness because they came out with their black strip and it was a very dark environment there for the Warriors game. So they were aware of the darkness.
It's raining as well, so, you know.
Yeah. But no moment summed it up more, I believe, than Alex Paulson bringing the ruckus. I don't know why he did it, but somehow Alex Paulson decided to get involved to start a kerfuffle on the field. And I think that kind of fired up Melbourne Victory. Because Melbourne Victory, I think that was before halftime. Melbourne Victory came out the second half, scored their goals, and won that game. So I think it fired up Melbourne Victory, and there was no need for it at all. Like Alex Paulson ran 20 minutes to start a scrap. What are you doing? I love you. But what are you doing, mate? Because that act instigated the dark forces of Papatūānuku and Ranganui. And to be honest, after that moment, it was all downhill. And I do have one little bit of housekeeping here because last week, I did mention the Socrates philosophies and hypotheses. And speaking of bringing the ruckus, I misattributed those lyrics to the Jizza when it was actually Inspector Deck. So if you'd entertain me here for a second before we get back to Auckland FC and Mount Smart Darkness, the correct line from Inspector Deck is, I bomb atomically, Socrates' philosophies and hypotheses. Now that's the first line of his verse in Triumph, which then got me down a rabbit hole because his first line, and these are the first verses of both songs, his first line in Protect Your Neck, which to the best of my knowledge was the first Wu-Tang Clan single, he comes out the gate, shut the gate. I smoke on the mic like smoking Joe Fraser, the Hellraiser, raising hell with the flavor. So shout out to Inspector Deck, the Socrates philosophies and hypotheses. What are your hypotheses of the darkness at Mount Smart Stadium? And do you think that Alex Paulson started it all?
No, but I mean, I don't, yeah, I can see how that would have played into Melbourne Victory's sort of mentality of going there and being like, yeah, we're the, I won't say underdogs because I don't know Melbourne Victory ever feel like they're underdogs, but they definitely, like, they're going into that game saying, we're away from home. Everyone here is there to support the other team. We've had to travel across the country, like between countries to get here. We're 1-0 down. We were the lower ranked team in the regular season up against the minor prems here. They had a sort of it feels weird to say siege mentality when they went into the other team's home. So you're not really under siege there, but they did have a sort of, I don't know, maybe a chip on their shoulder about the way they, it's like an ambush. They went out looking for an ambush there. Because the first 10, 15 minutes, well, the Victory were pretty excellent, and Auckland, I won't say they were rattled, but they definitely were facing something that I don't think they had to deal with in the first leg. Like they're under a level of pressure which they managed to withstand throughout, or not just withstand, but just to prevent in the first leg away from home there. And they did withstand that, and they did come through that all right, and they settled into the game after that. And I'm thinking, well, that was the blow that the Victory were there to throw, and they handled it. They got into their game, settled things down, and then we'll see Auckland FC at some point grab a goal and take this one beyond. But that didn't happen. And I don't think the Victory would have been too bummed about being 0-0 at halftime. They would have liked to have scored an early goal when they had their chance, but they also knew they were going to get an opportunity to reset and come out strong. So I think that would have happened regardless of Alex Paulson doing anything. And I almost wonder, like, when he's I'm trying to remember exactly what the thing was. It was like a foul on the edge of the box where their dude stayed down injured, but he was sort of the one that was making the tackle, but then he hurt himself or whatever. And so both teams sort of thought that they were the team being hard done by. But Paulson did run over and sort of throw a few hands, not bald fist hands, but he got up in there. And I don't know. In that moment, I'm thinking this is a goalkeeper trying to rock his lads up. Auckland were doing all right. I don't think they weren't on the wobbles at that point, but they also, it didn't feel like they really created anything in the first half. It was a very even game, which was running the risk of letting their slight advantage slip away, which turns out to be exactly what happened. But even then, this is the reason I wanted to write about it after the game, but I've sort of found myself, I have to, because I got a bunch of other stuff that I normally write on Mondays and Tuesdays to get through. But also I felt the need to sit with it for a little bit because I actually struggled to formulate my ideas. And how do I actually, I know how I feel, I'm disappointed, but what do I actually think about this? Like, what are the ideas I can put on the page? And I think it just comes down to, this was the type of team the way that Auckland FC play through a lot of the season, they are the type of team that does run the risk of this type of result. And the fact that it didn't really happen to them through the regulars is a bit crazy, but they weren't blowing teams away, right? They weren't winning 5-0 very often. There is an element to that I'll come back to later if we talk about the absence of Max Mata, but certainly the way they started the season with a bunch of those wins, they were a lot of 1-0, 2-1 type victories. And this was in a very similar vein against a team that has a lot of postseason experience. And the Auckland FC had enough of that to where that shouldn't have been an issue for them. But of course, it's also not an advantage if the other team have the same amount and more so if you're talking about specifically in the A-League. But I mean, ultimately, I think what I had to settle down to, and this podcast, it's going to fit nicely within the respect the darkness thing, because I think it was just one of those ones where like the darkness took over and that game completely changed on a deflected shot from outside the box, which is not the kind of effort that Auckland FC are worried about. They know they can get in front of those ones and block them, but this one just happened to catch Nando Peineka's like the inside of his leg as he was crouching to block it, sent Alex Paulson in the wrong direction, couldn't get back across in time, sneaks inside the post. They then have sort of like a 5, 10, 15-minute period where I don't think they reacted well at all to the fact that they had been 1-0 up and then suddenly they're not. Suddenly they have to go out and do something else. Like they're no longer in control of this tie. It's 1-1 on aggregate, and if it ends this way, we're going to extra time. But also Melbourne Victory have a bit of momentum suddenly, and then they made the slip up, allowed Victory to score a second goal, and they just ran out of time from there. But they sort of got one back, but it didn't count because the ball had gone out. And which I'm pretty sure the ball had gone out from, was it Guillermo Maia, I think, whipped the cross in for Logan Rogerson at the back post. I don't see how he could have hit it with that much curve, and Logan Rogerson winning that header 3 centimeters off the goal line for it not to have swerved out and come back in. But I also don't see a camera angle that proves it. So I think it's one of those ones where like you might have got a bit of in cricketing terms, like you might have got a bit of an umpire's call on the DRS there had it been given as a goal originally. You know what I mean? Like if they'd said pitched in line first and then the replay doesn't prove that it didn't pitch in line, well, you just got to go with the benefit of the doubt and the original call there. But the original call in this case was that it did go out. And it's just like a moment like that and the deflected goal, those kind of things, it doesn't take a lot to swing a playoff game because you got two excellent teams. There's not going to be a lot of goals between them, especially two very good defensive teams like these two. It doesn't take a lot to swing things when you get two sort of significant, just the spirits were not in your favor for those kind of moments. It's pretty hard to respond to. They might have snuck a goal at the end, but they didn't. And because they didn't, that's the end of their season. So it's a weird one to digest, but the way I've come out of it is, we'll say it again, like respect the darkness, because sometimes you just, sometimes it just wasn't written in the fates for you, right? Like Auckland FC were good enough to win that. They probably played well enough over the 180 minutes to win that, but then so did Victory. And when that's the case, it's like, well, someone's going to win and someone's going to lose, and the team who loses is going to feel like they didn't deserve it, but you're still going to lose. You're still going to wake up on Monday and you're out of the competition, and that's unfortunately what happened to Auckland FC.
Two quirky football observations. The instance where that there was like a foul situation, then Paulson rushed out to start a scrap. The Melbourne Victory player, like he was injured.
Yeah.
And it looked like it could have been an Achilles, it could have been a lower calf strain. He didn't dive. He was injured. So why would you boo?
I think he got subbed off as well.
Exactly. Why would you boo a player who is injured? I didn't understand that. Another thing, and we mentioned it
the situation, yeah.
But last week, Logan Rogerson scores the winner in Melbourne, rushes over to the fans. The fans, like a security guard, gets in between the fans and Logan Rogerson. Made a bit of a joke about it. The Victory's second goal, there was a poor lady, hope she's okay. The security guard who was right in front of the Melbourne Victory fans She is stuck in between a mob, a bunch of Melbourne Victory fans, a cluster, whatever you want to call it, a squad. And she's just getting like basically squeezed up against the railing. It was tough to watch. So I hope she's okay. Like I did have a chuckle about it in the away leg, but at some point you gotta, like, football fans, just chill out. I know it means a lot, but you don't need to rush past the security barriers. Like you can just contain yourself. It is all right. And of
Did you
course,
see the one in the NBL the other day in the Tuatara game where the one of the imports for the Tuatara goes like it's not a security guard issue, but he like dives to get a loose ball, but then in basketball for some reason, well, the some reason is that Americans can sell them, which is why it happens, and then everyone else copies what America does. For some reason in basketball, they always have these seats so close. So there was like a kid, like a teenage boy sitting there, courtside, and it's courtside in New Zealand, so it's not a fancy seat. It's probably like a plastic seat, it's probably a barbecue chair or something. And this like, yeah, one of the import dudes for the Tuatara goes diving for a loose ball and basically like gives him a bit of Sonny Bill Williams, like flattens him, knocks him off the chair and whatever. He was all right, like he got up and checked on him and everything, but it reminded me of that. Just like sometimes you can be in the wrong place at the wrong time at a sporting event.
Auckland FC, their success this season was all about being in the right place at the right time. They were always in the right place at the right time to get the second phase, to get the rebound, to get the mistimed kick. Any loose ball fell to Auckland FC. To me, that was most evident in the games against the Wellington Phoenix. Auckland FC, more experienced, more physical, faster, better instincts. They always won those balls. To be honest, that was the pattern throughout the whole season. I will get into the stats about Max Mata, but a lot of those, like the Mata influence comes from having a pure striker in the mixer. And when you keep putting the ball in the mixer from a long throw in, from a corner kick, as Auckland FC do, you're going to be a bit more successful if you've got a pure striker like Max Mata on the pitch, but that doesn't cover the tactic of Auckland FC, which is just get the ball in the mixer and win the ball. None of that happened against Melbourne Victory. It was that's where you get into the dark forces, because yes, Melbourne Victory, they might have been sharper, whatever it is. They might have been fired up for revenge against Alex Paulson. But the ball just didn't fall to them. The ball was in the mixer so much in that second half as they were chasing the goal. Long throw-ins, corner kicks, long passes, goal kicks. And Auckland FC just like never got the ball. And when they did get the ball, it was going in the wrong direction. I think there was one instance where maybe Vestrada was facing the goal and Cam Howison came and took the ball away from him and away from the goal. All those little things that to me have been a staple of Auckland FC football this season didn't work against Melbourne Victory in that game. And it is a bummer, but I mean, what can you do? There was another little thing, the Fornaroli, his goal. Because the first goal, I mean, whatever. Deflection's a deflection. I think Paulson might have still been a bit hungover from the red mist of his scrap, because he didn't react at all to the deflection, but I'm not a goalie, so what do I know?
It's very hard when it goes through the defender's legs, though. I think you don't even see it till late, and he's seeing the shot going in the other direction. So yeah, when it happened live, I didn't realize it was as much of a deflection, and I'm thinking, you're right there, AP. Like he's probably, I don't know, I thought he should have got there, but I've cut him a lot more slack with the replays, because I think that's quite a hefty one as well. It's like not just a hefty deflection, but it's like it's sneaking through the legs of Nando Pinecker, who's like the biggest body in front of you as well. So yeah,
and
tricky.
the deflections always generate more spin on the ball.
Yeah,
so then it curves more and stuff
which
like
I
that.
think Yeah, I think that one sort of did. Like
Yeah,
at
yeah.
first, unless I'm remembering this wrong, like it sort of looks like it's skidding past and it sort of
And it
swerves
curves
into
back in,
the
yeah.
inside the post. Yeah.
But the second goal, Fornaroli, I don't know how to explain this, but if we're going towards the goal, the ball's left of the goal as I'm facing the goal, and the center striker is in the middle of the field. But as I'm looking at the two center backs, the striker is on the right side of the left center back. So that basically means the two center backs are ball side of Fornaroli. The ball's on the left-hand side of the field, and the two center backs are ball side of Fornaroli. That can't happen. In my football coaching textbook, that can't happen. And these are excellent centre backs. Zen Peinecker, Dan Hall. But somehow that little lapse in concentration, which was part of that swing in momentum you were talking about, decided the game. And it was I haven't had such a moment of clarity when I'm watching football defense, and like Fornaroli's not between the centre backs. It's not like Fornaroli's closer to the left back. He is in the middle of the pitch, and both centre backs are on his left.
I'm watching it again now as you say that, which is nice. I was getting the commentary in my ears and the vision in my in my eyes. But he actually starts on the right side. He starts outside Dan Hall and he drifts across to outside Nando Peinecker, where the defense doesn't slide with him. You'd rather have him in between. So you got Hall if the ball's coming from that side or whichever side, whoever's like sort of the blindside defender, the blindside flanker can go and play the ball, and then the open side guy can tuck in, and then you shut down like the through ball and the sort of direct option there. But I mean, it's brilliant movement from Fornaroli, but it's also just a bit too static and a little bit too ball watchy from Auckland FC. And then above all of that, and I think maybe the reason that Peinecker in particular doesn't really move is he's thinking, well, he's going behind me, he's offside. Which is what I thought watching it live as well. I was sitting there being like, well, that's not going to count. And they're going to come back on VAR. And he was a mile off. And then they show the side-on angle where Francis de Vries is a meter or two behind everyone else. And he's not offside. And it's actually just like more great movement, taking advantage of the ability to slide across that sort of the edge of the penalty area and keep the defense active. Like that's where a lot of teams get into that situation where they you have the ball in the attacking third and you just go sideways, try with this side, try that side, don't want to whip it across because that's too low percentage. We want to create something a bit clearer, but you don't actually commit the defenders. And if you don't commit the defenders, they're just in their element. If you do commit the defenders though, and sometimes that's nothing to do with where the ball is, that's just to do with where the striker or whoever is moving, like Fornaroli does here. Ask Nando Peinecker, ask Dan Hall to make a decision, ask Francis de Vries to make a decision as well. And it only takes one of them to make the wrong decision for that to turn into a chance. And if you get a couple of them making the wrong decision, it's probably going to be a goal, which is kind of what happened here.
And these are players we've come to love this season. Franny de Vries, awesome, but he plays Fornaroli on side. Zen Peinecker, Dan Hall, awesome, but they lose track of Fornaroli. Alex Paulson, awesome, the best goalkeeper in the A-League. But he decides to do the football equivalent of a James Fisher-Harris shoulder charge late in the game. An unhinged moment of brutality. Like, what are you doing? Sakai, awesome, but he's injured. So he doesn't finish the game. This is like, I don't know, it's like, yeah, Auckland FC didn't play well, but a lot of these things you gotta just throw it up to the dark forces and say like it wasn't meant to be for Auckland FC in that game, and especially playing without Max Mata. You've got a bunch of stats in our newsletter, and our newsletter comes out every Monday and Thursday evening via Substack, thenichecache.substack.com. You got a few stats with and without Max Mata. I think the most important thing here, 2.48 goals per 90 minutes with Max Mata on the field. That goes down to 1.49 without Max Mata. And 2 games without Max Mata in the finals against Melbourne Victory, Auckland FC scored 1 goal. There's a lot that went wrong for Auckland FC in that game. So I'm like, you got to respect the darkness. Even if Max Mata's playing, they could have lost that game just as easily because of the bad juju that was happening there at Mount Smart that was cooking in the atmosphere. But Max Mata, he's a first 11 player for Auckland FC. We'll discuss a lot of the coming and goings, the signings, the transfers and stuff like that. But there's no guarantees Max Mata will be back at Auckland FC next season because I think he's on loan. So in all of this, Auckland FC being knocked out of the A-League finals, I think we do need to respect the Kiwi Max Mata for his influence on winning football for Auckland FC and his absence in the finals. And I mean, and that's the other thing, like it was interesting in Melbourne because there were a lot more, the youngsters got more minutes. But then you can kind of see how that was holding Auckland FC back in the game at Mount Smart because like Jesse Randall tries hard, a lot of effort, a lot of fitness, a lot of speed, had that burst in the first half. He's a good footballer. I wouldn't say he's a classy A-League striker right now. And it was those kind of little moments that were like, I don't know if Randall's going to help us get a goal back. He's going to help us work hard, but he's not going to help us get a goal back to win the game. And Max Mata's absence created that hole, and it also restricted, I think, how good Auckland FC could be.
Yeah, and Liam Gillian coming off the bench was a similar thing. Callan Elliott coming off the bench is Callan Elliott more so because he's replacing Hiroki Sakai. I'm like, that's not a there's a little bit of an injury aspect to that, but that's regardless of why the substitution is made, that's not a substitution that makes your team more likely to score a goal, even though Elliott has that, traditionally a more attacking player than Sakai. He's also not as good as the guy who's been to like 3 or 4 World Cups and played in Champions League of Europe and Asia both. And even Marley Francois, starting on the left wing, I don't remember him doing a whole lot. And I don't know, but at the same time, like at the end there where they're trying to find goals, I'm watching thinking, Moreno's trying to do a little bit too much here. Guillermo Mai's trying to do way too much here, and part of that was like, they're trying to score a goal, and I'm watching Guillermo Mai running back to halfway to try to get the ball. It's like, you give your defenders some credit. They can advance the ball, get in the box. You're the striker here, but that's part of the thing of not having Max Mata. And Mai actually did an interview with the A-League website during the week where he talked about like the biggest thing that changed for him this season was when they started playing a more physical number 9 in front of him, because he doesn't actually see himself in that role. He sees himself as an attacking midfielder, and I think he looks more like a second striker type guy, which is still effectively what he was doing. But you can see how he views himself as an attacking midfielder by how much he likes to drop in and how he likes to get his touches and drifting around and getting involved a lot deeper. But that's not what you want when you're chasing a goal, when you to force extra time in a semi-final. You just need bodies in the box. Like you almost might have been more suited by just putting Tommy Smith on there and just saying, go stand by the last defender and win some flick-on headers. And you already explained kind of what the difference between having Mata there and not having Mata there is. Their best outlet through most of those, through the whole season was crosses, but especially in that game, it felt like those corner kicks. It's like they didn't, but they could score from these if the ball just drops right to someone. But part of getting the ball to drop right for someone is not just sitting there and waiting for it to drop right. It's like getting enough people out there to contest for it. And even just having someone like Mata near the goalkeeper. Plenty of goals this season have come from situations like that. He's not getting a goal for that. He's not getting an assist for that. But his presence is at least distracting, and it's either putting the keeper off and preventing him from being able to challenge for the ball, or it's drawing maybe one of their better aerial challengers away from someone else who might otherwise be marking Pinecker or Hall or whoever. So like there's just and I mean it just plays having a player like that up front plays so much into the bullying aspect as well, which I won't say they went away from that in this second leg, but I will say Melbourne matched it. And I didn't know necessarily that Melbourne could match it. It definitely didn't match it in the first leg, but they did in the second leg. So, like, massive credit to Melbourne Victory for a performance like that. Because I think in a lot of ways they took what worked for them in little small patches in the home leg, and then limited a lot of the stuff that didn't work for them in that game, came out there in the second match with a game plan that was adapted to the opponents that they were playing. And frankly, Auckland FC haven't faced that really this season. It's the first time they played obviously, their first finals trips, so the first time they've had to play the same team 2 games in a row. And there was probably a little bit of a tactical battle there that Steve Corica didn't win finally. And they're also just like the way they didn't react very well to conceding. They've scored a lot of they've had good comeback results for them. But the best of their start, and it's a lot of late goals, but the late goals aren't necessarily late equalizers. There was 1 or 2 of them. Most of those were late winners. It's like pushing on to try score on top of that, looking for a victory, being the proactive, aggressive team. Having to play from behind is not something they've done a lot of this season, and especially in the pressure of that kind of game where it's just like the clock's ticking faster than you can believe. And I don't think they handled the occasion that well, frankly. I think once they got put under a little bit of pressure, they didn't wilt, but they weren't their dominant selves, certainly for long enough to allow the Victory to get a crucial second goal. But even after that, it just like it might have still worked. They might have still been able to just like whip the ball into the box often enough that something lands, or Nando Pinecker having a shot cleared off the line near the end. It could have happened, but I don't think they gave themselves the best chance there. And I think part of that was, in fact, let's be bold about it. I'll say they would have won this tie with Max Mata starting those games. In fact, he didn't even need to start the first game. They got what they needed out of the first game. If Max Mata plays that second leg, I think Auckland FC would have won that. But it was just one more thing, not having him, just one more of those things where it's like maybe this alone, although looking at the stats, I don't know that it is that alone. He only played a third of the minutes, but they scored nearly half their goals while he was on the pitch. So maybe there is actually a pretty significant thing there to say that he is one of their most influential players tactically. But, we'll cut some slack there for a guy who only played about 800 minutes this season, only played about a third of the season, and say like, it was one of several things where it's like, this might not be definitive on their own, but when they start to add up, they really do start to add up. And even then, it was only just like they were inches away from forcing extra time in that game. That's how close it was, but close wasn't close enough.
Can I quiz you on 3 other topics before we get into the Warriors and some rugby league? We've had news this morning that Kosta Barbarouses will depart the Wellington Phoenix. What do you reckon?
Well, I like it when these ones happen because everyone acts like it's the worst thing imaginable, and I get to sit back and be like, I don't know. I'm not so sure. I think there's an argument to say that the Phoenix could be better with a different type of striker there, the way they were trying to play last season. I actually think while he was, he was clearly the player of the season, he swept all the awards stuff. I thought there was a pretty extended spell through the middle of things as the season started to get away from them, where I don't actually think he was playing that well. I just don't think there was anyone else who was playing nearly as well as him over the full span of the season. He finished strong. He started brilliantly. There was a good chunk of like half the season in the middle there where he was doing a lot of things that weren't like the things that were this isn't him playing the way that he's been successful at. for during this Phoenix stint. There's a lot of dropping in and trying to do little layoffs and stuff rather than being the guy who um he's doing Guillermo my stuff rather than trying to do Bruno Fornaroli stuff, where be that guy who makes those clever movements in the attacking third and try to get on the end of crosses and drifting around the backs of of defenders to get out of their eyesight, ducking and weaving, smart stuff like he's made a whole career of, which he did get back to a bit more towards the end, partly as they got Chico Heraldez to be that guy who could be the sort of attacking creative pivot instead. Briefly until he got injured. That was just the season that it was for the Wellington Phoenix. At least Auckland FC's darkness only had to face one game. So the Phoenix had many moons of that. But yeah, I don't know that. I certainly don't look at a 35-year-old Kosta Barbarouses and think like this is an irreplaceable player, that they're going to struggle to get anything like that. The trick of it is that you are losing a high-scoring local player. So you can certainly find imports who can do the job that Kosta Barbarouses does, but can you find somewhere in your team another local player who can have that amount of impact? That's tricky because local players who are that good often like good enough to be pushing for a World Cup selection, mostly not playing in the A-League. Or if they are, they're trying not to be playing in the A-League. They're ready to move somewhere else. And if that's not the case, well, then maybe they're already at the Phoenix. But mostly looking back on this, I think my main thought, the Phoenix will figure something out. That's all right. But I find this weird from Kosta Barbarouses' perspective, especially seeing Sean Gill, I think it was, did a little like a press conference on the thing this morning after that news broke, and he said it a couple of times where it was like, so why has he left? Oh, he's thought his football would be better suited elsewhere, something along those lines, something to that effect, which is not like he left the Phoenix once before very strictly for like family reasons, so that I could have expected something like that. But the idea that he thought there was or that he thinks there is a better option than the club where he scored like 20 odd goals in the last 2 seasons and worked his way back into all-white selection, having been on the outer of all-white selection for a little while there. He worked his way back into all-white selection, and now he's leaving that environment in the year of a World Cup, I think is super risky, especially because Kosta Barbarouses himself don't think this is true. I think this is just one of those things where athletes sometimes convince themselves of something, but he wasn't selected for the 2010 World Cup squad right at the start of his career, and he was like telling people as recently as a couple months ago while the All Whites were trying to get back to the latest ones, like, yeah, well, the reason I didn't get picked is because I left the Wellington Phoenix, so Ricky Herbert held a grudge against me, which Ricky Herbert said wasn't true. But like, if you believe that's true, and he should have been at that World Cup, by the way, I don't know why he wasn't, but for whatever reason it was, if you believe it, like that's your perception that you missed out on a World Cup and you spent your whole career trying to get back there, and you think it was because you left the Wellington Phoenix at the wrong time, and now you're going to leave the Wellington Phoenix a year out from another World Cup. Like you're playing with fire there, because I could very easily see a situation where Barbarouses goes to another club and it doesn't quite suit the way that he operates in, and they're not going to give him the same leeway that the Phoenix would, because of the goodwill he's earned in the last 2 years of scoring a whole bunch of goals for them. Like he had a perfect role, didn't always play to that perfect role, as I was saying, but when it worked really well. And he's leaving that for something else. So I think that is, I think that might be good news for Ben Waine and Max Mata trying to compete for what was potentially one spot in the World Cup selection between them. Well, maybe that might be best 2 out of 3 with Kosta Barbarouses of his next landing spot, if that isn't a smooth landing wherever he ends up.
Well, if he doesn't make this World Cup squad after leaving the Phoenix, at least we will know for sure that it wasn't because of some grudge about him leaving the Phoenix.
Yeah, it won't be Ricky Herbert's fault this time.
We've also had we've had a football first squad, New Zealand under 20 men, and an all-white squad. I think we talked a bit about the football first squad last week. There are, as usual, lots of Wellington Phoenix and Auckland FC players in the under 20s squad. Between the under-20s and the all-white squad, are there any notable selections or players you've been thinking about as just notable headline acts?
I think the one that stands out the most in the under-20s, it is a nice little, I wrote about it a bit, I think, on Friday, it's a nice selection of like some of the best players in the Phoenix Academy. A lot of them have been close to the first team. Some of the best players in the Auckland FC. You actually get like a good chunk from both of those clubs, which is maybe the first time at youth level where that's been the case, although we've had it with the All Whites for a little while where there's a good chunk of Auckland and Wellington players. One or two overseas based players, not a lot, but a couple of new ones as well there. But I think the most interesting angle on the under-20s is that Luke Brooks-Smith is there, because Luke Brooks-Smith is also eligible for the under-17 World Cup that's happening later this year, and maybe he won't go to that. Like maybe they'll just decide you're past that, and it'll be during the A-League season, I think. So he might just be he might not be released. At the same time, they might decide, well, actually, that's a pretty good opportunity, and you're going to be maybe one of the best players there. You already went to one under-17 World Cup, and you're still young enough to be able to go to another one. It's not a long list of players who have gone to under-17 and under-20 World Cups in the same year. It's pretty hard to do. Most recently, not the last cycle, but the cycle before that, and the women's side, we did get Millie Clegg and Ruby Nathan both did it. Millie Clegg was scoring goals at both of those World Cups. That's how amazing she was doing at that point. Ruby Nathan, don't think really played other than a few minutes maybe off the bench in the under-20s, but she was in that squad, so she's also deserves the same recognition for being selected to both. Billy Clegg, of course, then also got selected to a senior World Cup squad within 12 months of that happening. Didn't play at that World Cup, but was in the wider squad, so she was picked for all three of them in a quick hurry. And there is a senior World Cup squad coming next year. I don't think that's soon enough for Luke Brooks-Smith to be able to do the three-peat the same as Millie Clegg, but there is a chance he might do the double up. There's definitely a chance he could go to the he's by getting selected for the under-20 for this touring squad that they've got, which is going to Chile, which is who they're the hosts of the under-20 World Cup. So they're going and playing the host in a couple of games a few months early, get a little bit of acclimatization sorted. By getting selected in that squad, that's already proof that he's on the radar. And we know he's one of the best under-17s players. And he has a professional contract with the Wellington Phoenix, so it's not impossible, especially at the Phoenix, where he's going to be getting some minutes because he already did last season. He'll be playing more than that this season. It's not impossible. He might even he might have a crack at that Senior World Cup. I think that's very unlikely because I'm pretty sure Darren Bazley's quite sorted on what his squad is going to look like, and it would take injuries or drastic drops of form for anything to change. Outside of maybe one or two spots that are up for grabs. That last striker is one of them. The third goalkeeper is another one. Maybe a bit of backup right back too could be something. But yeah, I'm very much hoping for the Luke Brooks-Smith experience to go that way. Let's see him at the under-17s. Let's see him at the under-20s. Why not?
You did mention the players in the under-20 squad from overseas clubs. I'll just list them here. James Bull Kelly, he's with FC Dallas. Harry Cassie is with Western United. Luca Coveney is with Western United as well. Noah DuPont is with West Bromwich Albion. Henry Gray, Ipswich Town. Keegan Kelly, University of Denver. Troy Putt, Minnesota United. And then Stipe Jukic, NK Istra, 1961. And Joseph Wallace is also with West Bromwich Albion. We also, last football thing here, we had the epic achievement of New Zealand's leading striker, Chris Wood, is definitely going to the World Cup if he's fit and available. He doesn't have to worry about any grudges held or his form heading into the World Cup. He'll be there. And he may lead all players at the World Cup for offsides. Because Chris Wood this season, he has won your prestigious Golden Flegg Award for the most offsides in the Premier League. 3rd time in his career. So let's light one up, pour some out, celebrate for Chris Wood and his offside exploits, which are far more interesting, far more exciting, far bigger achievement than whatever Nottingham Forest are doing. But what have Nottingham Forest been doing?
Well, they did kind of run out of gas towards the end of the season, which is to be expected for a team that's not used to playing all the way to the end like that. They've only been a couple years back in the Premier League. Dropped a few too many points along the way, but they won last week against West Ham, which put them in a position where if they could beat Chelsea in the final game of the season and get one of 2 other results go their way, which was, I think they needed Aston Villa to drop points against Manchester United, and they needed Newcastle United to drop points, or they needed Newcastle United to drop points against Everton, which... Yeah, it only had to be one of those 2 other results to go their way, but they did also need to beat Chelsea. As it happens, Villa lost and Newcastle lost, so both of those results went exactly the way they wanted them. But Nottingham Forest also lost. They went down 1-0 to Chelsea, so they were 2 points short of qualifying for Champions League. Instead, they end up in 7th place, but because England has some good coefficients, 7th place will still get them some... We'll still get them some European football next season, which was already guaranteed going into the final round. They knew, worst case scenario, they'd be playing Europa Conference League, so the 3rd tier competition. They'd be playing Conference League qualifiers. When I say qualifiers, I think they enter in the playoff round. So it's the last round before the group phase, the league phase, whatever they call it these days, which they will probably be seeded for, and so will probably they should be favoured to advance, but they will have to still get something out of that. But I think crucially, that those games it'll be a 2-legged game playoff, but crucially that will be in more like August kind of range. So as the Premier League season is getting underway, not like some of those teams who start in like the first round of European qualifying, and you got to start playing games in like July, and it messes up your whole preseason. So Forest won't have that issue, which is good because we want a good long. Sturdy preseason for Forest as they hope, to give Tyler Bindon and Marko Stamanic as much room as possible to try and impress and maybe stick around and be a part of that Europa Conference League campaign. There is an angle maybe that works out better for them, because in the Champions League you'd feel more pressure and probably also have a little bit more financial room to go out and sign maybe more proven players, whereas Conference League it's a bit more get away with playing a few more youngster guys there, so that might leave the door slightly ajar for Bindon and Stamanic, hopefully, but certainly it'll be an opportunity for Chris Wood to go play in some European football, which he's only ever done, I think, twice in his career. There was once with Burnley where they didn't get through Europa qualifiers, but they did have some qualifiers. They got there by virtue of like they had the best fair play record in Europe or something, and back then they were giving out an extra spot for that for some reason. So he had one stint there with Burnley, and he also on loan at Birmingham, on loan at Birmingham earlier on in his career, quite early on in his career. It was sort of one of his first big breaks actually. He played a little bit of what is now Europa League, but I think back then it might have still been called the UEFA Cup. So he's had a little bit of experience in Europe. That might be the one aspect where Marko Stamanic can come in and give him some tips, because Marko Stamanic has already played in the Champions League for 2 different clubs, plus in the Europa League this past season. So he's actually got more experience in UEFA competition than Wizzy does. But yeah, hopefully they'll get to line up together next season in the Conference League, the mighty Conference League, which they actually, like, because it's not the Champions League, Forest would have a chance to do quite well in that. They could potentially go fairly deep in that, which would be fun as well.
And given how Australia celebrated Ange Postecoglou winning the Europa League, it is obviously the most prestigious football competition in the world, because the Aussies are viewing old Ange as some sort of footballing deity for winning a 2nd-tier European competition. So shout out to him and shout out to football. We are chatting a lot of domestic football on our weekly bonus podcast, which is available every week on Patreon. Sign up to Patreon, patreon.com/thenichecache. A couple of dollars a month goes a long way in helping us do what we love to do. The full newsletter, free section, and the paid section is copied into Patreon the next day. So you get the full newsletter as well. And of course, the bonus podcast is available on Substack with a paid Substack subscription, which then obviously gives you access to the full newsletter. You can also donate through Buy Me a Coffee and read all our work on thenichecache.com. You mentioned bullies and bullying and being bullied a fair bit in the Auckland FC game. And obviously we know Auckland FC, up until the last game of the season, they were the Blue Rider Bullies, the BRBs. No surprises then that the Warriors lost by being bullied by the Raiders. I think the Raiders are the best team the Warriors have played this season. Not a hot take, because the Raiders have beaten the Warriors in both their games. And it's not just it's not just the fact that they've beaten them twice this season. And these games are always pretty close. Like the Las Vegas one wasn't close, but I think there was a golden point game versus the Raiders last season. And there was also a good contest down in Christchurch off the top of my head. So the Raiders games are always pretty fun, ruthless, rugged, high action rugby league, and the Raiders are the best team the Warriors have played this season. Shout out to Joseph Tapine. He is awesome. And I also thought there was something happening there with the Raiders, I reckon, where the players from Auckland were awesome. Simi Sasangi playing 80 minutes for the first time this season at edge forward. He's from Auckland. Ellerslie Jr., Matthew Tomoko's from Auckland. He was putting shots on, good runs. Oda Huhu Jr., Ellerslie Jr. played first 15 at Auckland Grammar. Sebastian Chris is Australian, but he plays for the New Zealand Kiwis, so he was fired up as well. I still have Tomoko and Chris as my starting centre combination for the Kiwis, and obviously Joseph Tapine's in the middle. Simi Sasangi and Ata Mariota. Mariota's a Manurewa Jr. I think they will both keep or start representing Samoa. And shout out to Benaiah Ioelu, who made his debut for the Roosters. He is from Otara Tangaroa College product. And he played for a few junior clubs in Auckland, Howick, Mount Albert, and Ellerslie. He was recruited by the Roosters while still at Tangaroa College. And he is a very good dummy half, crafty dummy half, skillful dummy half, who has been in the Roosters system for a few years now. I predict that he will also represent Samoa. And he has an opportunity to be like a long-term dummy half for Samoa, which, as I wrote in the newsletter, this is the Kiwi-NRL vibe. This is why I put everything under the Kiwi-NRL umbrella and ease up on focusing on the New Zealand Kiwis, because in New Zealand, we have a very vibrant cultural rugby league scene. So Salisi Faketi, first debutant of this year, playing for the Roosters, Manurewa Jr., he will probably play for Tonga because he played junior footy for Tonga. And I predict he will play for Tonga. Benaiah Ioelu has already represented Samoa at a junior level. And I think he will represent Samoa. You can go through the debutants, because I reckon Bailey Bentley Harpe is probably going to stay with Fiji. Moses Leo's an option for Samoa, as well as New Zealand, obviously. And then we've got Sean Mullaney, Tyrone Thompson, and Tanner Stowers-Smith, who I all think will represent the Kiwis. Stowers-Smith is also eligible for Samoa, but I'm using me vibration ting to predict what nations they will represent. So good weekend for Samoan Rugby League, because Simi Sasangi was awesome. Mariota did his job off the bench, and Benaiah Ioelu made his debut for the Roosters. 7 Kiwi-NRL debutants this year so far. As I said, Faketi, Bentley Harpe, Leo, Mullaney, Thompson, Stowers-Smith, and Benaiah Ioelu. There was also an instance where Jacob Laban for some reason, he took the kickoff to run it straight at Corey Horsburgh. And that was part of the juju stuff that was happening this weekend. Like, Savilio Tamale seemed to have a one-out battle with Dartene Welesniak. How about that one? Dylan Watene-Zelezniak, and Tamale completely outplayed Dylan Watene-Zelezniak. Simi Sasangi played
Dragons legend, Tamale.
There you go. Simi Sasangi played 80
one
minutes.
game wonder.
Sasangi played 80 minutes on his home turf. Joseph Tapine, he didn't just bully the Warriors, he bullied Mount Smart because he was giving it the crying emojis and all this stuff. Like, he just owned Mount Smart. So the Raiders, they seemed hyper aware of what was going on. And Jacob Laban doesn't play prop. Jacob Laban plays edge forward. But if you remember back to last season, he stood there as Corey Horsburgh punched him multiple times in New South Wales Cup. And as we know, Corey Horsburgh, bit of a loose unit. He's a bit of a goofball, but whatever. So then in this game, for some reason, Jacob Laban takes the hit up off the kickoff and runs it straight into Corey Horsburgh. He does have a little match review committee situation, I think, because he apparently lifted his leg, but why wouldn't you? So that all of that is to say, it was just some weird stuff happening in that game that fits into alignment with the vibration out of Mount Smart, the frequency of Mount Smart that weekend. Swing back to the Warriors. So Tapine was the big bully. He led that Raiders team. I'm not too worried about this, though, because the Warriors were without their bullies. Fisher Harris, Mitchell Barnett. And it's one thing, like I've said, Fisher Harris, Barnett, Aaron Clark. Awesome middle forward trio. It's one thing to have Aaron Clark as like the third dude of that trio. He's a feisty little bugger. He's coming up behind Barnett, behind Fisher Harris, talking his shit, doing his thing. That works very well. But when Aaron Clark is the one dude leading that, doesn't quite work out as well because, I mean, Tarpane's just like, yeah, whatever, bruh. Yeah, whatever Corey House, bruh. It's all good. But Tarpane's not doing any of those antics with Fisher Harris, right? Corey Horsburgh isn't going to bully Mitchell Barnett. That's not happening. But without those two, then you can see how the Raiders were hyped up for this game and made the most of it. I think the Raiders, their style of footy is not just entertaining, and they have a hearty Kiwi-NRL crew, so I like the Raiders. But they seem to like stop the Warriors doing what they want to do as well. And whether it's the physicality, whether it's the speed with and without the ball, the offloading, the niggle, everything the Raiders do works well against the Warriors. No Fisher Harrison Barnett, okay, so I'm not too worried about this game. Also, what happened the last time the Warriors lost to the Raiders? They won 3 games in a row. What's the last time? When was the last loss before this game against the Storm? What happened after that? They won 5 games in a row, I think. So I view this as a very interesting learning moment. And next week, the Warriors are against the Rabbitohs, I believe, which will be, I think that's going to be a better gauge of where the Warriors are at because, again, it's in Australia. Rabbitohs are decent under Wayne Bennett. And I don't know, I just feel like the Raiders are very good at rugby league and their style matches up against the Warriors nicely. And hopefully they can get Barnett back, maybe get Fisher Harris back. Maybe Ali Leotawa isn't driven backwards with every run. That would be handy. Maybe Dylan Watene-Zelezniak actually dents the line instead of doing sweet FA. Like, that would be handy. But that's what the Raiders do to you. There was also the news about Moala Graham-Taufa. He's going to join the Rabbitohs next season. And that's a very good move. The Warriors side of me, I really like Moala Graham-Taufa. I'm not sure why he hasn't played more, but I don't know. I feel like Moala Graham-Taufa would have done a better job than Ali Leotawa coming back from injury in that first game against the Raiders. Leotawa's first game coming back from injury. Just because he's got speed, he's got zip, whereas Leotawa was a bit slow, bit clunky. And all those dudes, like Tuivasa-Sheck came back with no reserve grade. Wataneza-Lesniak came back with no reserve grade. Leotawa's back in with no reserve grade. You can see it in their NRL performances. So I don't really like that. But in theory, they are all top 17 players, so they should go back in. But whatever. Graham-Taufa, this is a great move for him. He returns to Sydney. For the Warriors' perspective, Kurt Capewell is just a safer NRL centre right now than Graham-Taufa, so that's a stopgap, plug hole. You got Leotawa, Berry doing good stuff as, to me, Leotawa, Berry, and Pompey are all centres ahead of Graham-Taufa, and I think Capewell's better at plugging that hole. And that's where Graham-Taufa is. So he's got a better opportunity. All good. It's just a move that makes sense. But I'm more intrigued about the Rabbitohs side of things because the Rabbitohs, they recruited, they developed, kind of, Bailey Bentley-Harpe. Bailey Bentley-Harpe's from up north. Roosters recruited him from up north. He had a few years in their system, but then he takes a break, probably due to injury, but he reappears in the Rabbitohs system and he builds towards an NRL debut. That's the same story with Graham-Taufa. From Auckland, Maris Jr., Roosters recruit him and his twin brother, Lani. They go through the Roosters system. They return to Auckland in the pandemic. Moala keeps playing. He's played 3 seasons of New South Wales Cup with the Warriors. Then the Rabbitohs come knocking. And the Rabbitohs have a habit of coming knocking at the moment. Because over the summer, they recruited Salisi Ata-Ata from the Sharks, Otahuhu Jr. The Rabbitohs also had Devante Mihinui, Glenora Jr. from Auckland. He was in the Sea Eagles, moved to the Bulldogs over the summer. Mid-season, early in the season, he moves from Bulldogs to Rabbitohs. So the Jersey Flegg team for the Rabbitohs this week, I believe, let me double check. Devante Mihinui scored a try, and he was starting prop alongside Nazareth Tawa, Maris Jr. from Auckland. So the Rabbitohs used to have very few Kiwi-NRL juniors in their squad. Now they're building it up again. Bailey Bentley-Harpe, Saliva Havili, Salisi Ata-Ata's on the fringe. Then you got 2 starting props in the under-21 team, Nazareth Tawa and Devante Mihinui. Add Moala Graham-Taufa into there. And now the Rabbitohs are cooking with their Kiwi-NRL recruitment and development. And Moala Graham-Taufa fits right into that. I can see, if Bailey Bentley-Harpe returned to footy through the Rabbitohs system and developed into an NRL player, I can see Moala Graham-Taufa playing NRL for the Rabbitohs next season. So it's just a good move. And the Warriors, they lose a very good centre, I believe, but they've got centres ahead of him and they got centres behind him. The Warriors had a big win over the Bulldogs in New South Wales Cup and Jersey Flegg. So that was very useful. Sio Kelly is a centre, but he played on the wing for the Warriors in New South Wales Cup, which was a bit tricky for him. But I view Sio Kelly as the next up freaky centre prospect. And I'm also tracking Kalis Putoko from, I think he's from Tokoroa. He's doing a nice job at centre in the Jersey Flegg team. There's a lot of talent coming through the Warriors system. So there's no shortage of outside backs, specifically centres, ready to take that spot left by Moala Graham-Taufa. I'd say right now, the next best centre is Theo Kelly. And he might be better than Moala Graham-Taufa, to be honest. But I do not think Theo Kelly's necessarily a winger, which is where he played on the weekend. And I think Dayon Amatuano is the next up wing prospect for the Warriors. I watched him. We got that New South Wales Cup game on tele. So it was good to see that game full 80 minutes. And Dayon Amatuano is really good. Very powerful, very aggressive winger. He's got that NRL body, long, lean, fighting machine. I've talked about it every week, to be honest, but the Jason Salalilo, Toby Crosby punch off the bench is very good. They are going to be in the NRL mix next season, just grinding away in New South Wales Cup, playing through the middle. Toby Crosby keeps getting better and better and better. Jason Salalilo, the next up player from Christchurch behind Tanner Stowers-Smith. And obviously these dudes, well, Stowers-Smith's ahead of them, but you got Fatialofa, Eri Aramia Toiava, who are edge forwards, who are closer to NRL. But if I'm thinking, who are our next? Like Tom Alley's in the mix. He's playing very well for New South Wales Cup. But then you've got Jason Salalilo and Toby Crosby. And if you look at this reserve grade game from the weekend, Zion Mai'uu, he actually came off the bench for the Bulldogs. And his spot in the squad has been taken up by Salalilo and Crosby. And I think they're just as good. And when I was thinking about it, maybe Zion Mai'uu, the Warriors just thought he's the slowest young forward we have. So you can take a better opportunity. Maybe it just wasn't much more to it because he is the slowest middle forward they have. Toby Crosby's faster. Salalilo's faster. Keilani Going's faster. Iriaramia Toiava, edge middle versatility. Kalis Fatialofa, edge middle versatility. Tanner Stowers-Smith is more mobile than Zion Mai'uu. So I can see how that move came about. Exactly the same way I can see how the Moala Graham-Taufa move to Rabbitohs for next season came about. They just make sense. Deep breath, to slow down, to respect the darkness. The best nugget from the Warriors weekend of footy, though, is that, of course, got to respect the Bulldogs. Bulldogs love Aotearoa, men and women. But all we hear about is the Bulldogs development system, right? How Gus Gould has come in, he's got the whole system firing, and wow, Bulldogs, they do the great job developing talent. New South Wales Cup, Jersey Flegg, both lost to the Warriors in Auckland. And Bulldogs, they had a lot of players from Auckland, Aotearoa in their squads and their teams. Taniela Otakulo returning to Mount Smart. Zion Mai'uu returning to Mount Smart. Alekola Simi Jones from St. Paul's College returning to Auckland. Whamai Toi Lalo returning to Auckland. And in their Jersey Flegg Cup team, they had Roy Tutupo, Mount Albert Grammar. He was at fullback. Genesis Arkham Sherlock starting centre. I think he's a Linwood junior. Cassius Tia from Marist starting halfback. Malakai Filippo starting prop from Mount Albert. Carwin Patterson, who was playing under 17s for the Warriors last year, was 18th man for the under 21s for the Bulldogs this year. He's from Westlake Boys High School. But both of those teams lost to the Warriors. And the Warriors won those games with an under 21 halves combination of Jet Cleary and Luke Hanson in New South Wales Cup. They won the under 21s game with an under 19 halves pairing of Jack Thompson and Maui Winitana Patalaseo. So New South Wales Cup won with two under 21 halves. the under-21s team won with 2 under-19 halves. I don't know. It just seems useful. Seems like something good that happened. Did get a lot of Jet Cleary viewing time. Jet Cleary, like, there's a nice difference between Jet Cleary and Luke Hansen. I think Luke Hansen's better at the rugby league skills. He's got a better kicking game. He's faster, and he's a better passer than Jet Cleary. And he's played a lot more New South Wales Cup, so he's closer to NRL footy. Jet Cleary just has a natural footy stuff to him. He's always there. He's always aggressive. Every tackle, he wants to smash you, and he's Jet Cleary. Every run, he wants to run over you, but he's Jet Cleary. He's not like a prop. He's Jet Cleary. Jet Cleary has this natural footy fizz and energy that you can see why he's a high potential half. But I think Luke Hansen has the better skills right now. And I'm like, it's not like Luke Hansen has some energy, but he doesn't have Jet Cleary energy. Jet Cleary has skills, but he hasn't done those skills for 20 New South Wales Cup games like Luke Hansen has. And also shout out to that under-21s halves combination of Winitana Patalaseo, who's from Wellington, and Jack Thompson, who's one of the young Aussie halves from the Knights. Winitana Patalaseo played the SG Ball season. Now he's getting his one of his, don't know if it's first, but it might be his first of the season, game of under-21s. And Jack Thompson was part of the under-17 Harold Matthews Cup championship team last year, but he didn't play SG Ball earlier this season and came straight back into Jersey Flegg footy for the Warriors. So if you're worrying about the Warriors' halves depth, well, what happened this weekend? Luke Metcalf, Chanel Harris-Tavita in the halves for the NRL team. Tamaita Martin was on the bench. Tanner Boyd was 18th man. So that opened up the holes in the New South Wales Cup team for the 2 under-21 halves to come in. Jet Cleary, Luke Hansen. They left the holes in the under-21s team for 2 under-19 halves to play. Jack Thompson and Winitana Patalaseo. But Jack Thompson has been playing for the last few weeks alongside Jet Cleary. So there's the whole kind of halves map situation for you. We'll just roll quickly through some NBL where Canterbury Rams, they're still first, top of the table, 10-2. They've won their last 5 games. They have Wellington Saints have played 2 more games and had 2 more losses. So Canterbury Rams are still doing their thing, but I think we need to check back in with 17-year-old Jackson Ball, who is doing some crazy stuff for the Hawke's Bay Hawks. They have had 4 wins and 1 loss in their last 5 games. They're up to 5th on the NBL ladder. We started the season talking about Jackson Ball because he bowled out against the now defunct Indian Panthers. Kakite, ciao for now, ciao for later. Out the gate, but we're shutting the gate on the Indian Panthers because you got to go. And Jackson Ball has kept dominating the NBL against teams that are still in the NBL. So that's a pretty important development for Jackson Ball. I feel like I need to say it again. He's 17 years old and he's playing 35 minutes per game, 21 points per game, 3.5 assists per game, 1 block per game, 1.5 steals per game. 3-point percentage of 33. So he's shooting the odd 3-pointer, makes his free throws 82%. Rebounds, 3 rebounds a game. What have you seen from Jackson Ball over the last week or so to provide us with an updated check back in? with the most notorious Ball brother?
The Ball brother of all brothers. It is the same stuff, but that in itself is amazing because he was the MVP of the little preseason tournament, but that's preseason, right? There's not everyone's there. Then he was dropped 40 on, the RIP Panthers. Okay, but that was against the Panthers, But then he's continued to do this throughout the season, just that level of consistency. You forget that he's 17 years old and only just turned 17 at the start of the season as well. It's not like he's 17 in 350 days or anything like that. He's a young 17. And every game you watch him for the Hawke's Bay Hawks, he has a positive influence. And that's not just not normal for a young player. That is so far beyond normal. Like that's insane stuff for someone like that to have the level of consistency. And you're seeing it in let me check here. Where are his shooting percentages? He's shooting 67% of his 2-pointers, 35% of his 3-pointers, 84% from the free throw line. That's amazing in and of itself. No, that's a better 3-point percentage than Isaiah Le'afa, for example. And that's not even the strength of his game. The strength of his game when you watch him is just his fluid movements when he's spinning out of the little post moves and stuff. But it's also when he's attacking the rim too. He's not just posting up. This is a guy with an outside shot. This is a guy with, who chips in and does his work defensively. I think, obviously, with all young players, the defensive aspect is always going to be the one that needs the most work. That's the one that takes the longest to get going. But he's got so many tools for a player of his age. It's baffling to think that he is a player of his age. You know what I mean? And let's not forget as well. This isn't he's doing this as a starter alongside import players, and he's doing a lot of this good work. And can't remember who it was that the Hawks beat most recently, but I was watching that game, and it was like he was crucially important to them in the fourth quarter. He didn't disappear when the game was most on the line. That's when he made his most memorable contributions. So none of this is normal for a player of his age. This is it's distinctly abnormal. But he is part of a wider generation at the moment, which is going to be highlighted a little bit more at the under 20 World Cup, whatever it is, later in a month or two's time, which Jackson will be a part of. 19s, yeah, under 19s. So he's one of many, and as a representative of that group, he is there's a lot of talent flying around Kiwi basketball at the moment because 17-year-olds aren't supposed to be able to do the stuff that he's doing.
And he is second for average points for the Hawke's Bay Hawks, second for average assists. His 3-point percentage is 33%, as I said, and that is basically the same as two others. Campbell Scott, Ezra Eagle, and they've shot. Well, for dudes who have had a big shooting load, let's maybe rephrase that one. For players who have shot a lot of 3-pointers for the Hawke's Bay Hawks, and by a lot, I mean more than one a game, Jackson Ball, he's 33%. The guy ahead of him is 33.3%. So he's tied for first for the Hawke's Bay Hawks 3-point shooting. It's going to be very interesting to watch if he can, I don't want to say a 17-year-old can carry the Hawke's Bay Hawks through to a finals push. But, I mean, if he's a key figure in that team if the Hawks can get into finals basketball, it's going to be very fun to watch. And as we talked about last week, as you alluded to, he's not alone. There's a lot of very good young basketballers in the NBL right now. and we need to keep it moving because we've got a bit of cricket to talk about, but we will be talking a lot more NBL basketball as those finals heat up and as the A-League's gone, so we don't need to talk about that as much. So we can dive a little bit more into the basketball realms. Is he the best youngster in New Zealand right now? Like, how do you rank him compared to a Hayden Jones? Obviously, Julius Halafai-Noa has been in college playing basketball. Other guys from the under-19 squad, Troy Plumlee, Tama Isaac, Oscar Goodman. Is he playing NBL? Is he in college?
He's in college as well. I think him and Halafai-Noa either... I don't think they've actually played college yet, but they're sort of over there affiliated with their colleges. One of them might have redshirted the first year because they didn't get there in time, or something like that. I don't know, or just staying eligible for the next season when maybe the role was better for them. I don't know, or it might be a couple of those guys in around that age range also go over and do like prep school stuff just to make sure they, partly that the academic stuff lines up with however Americans decide to do their grading stuff, but also like it's just a nice way of getting into the sort of system there. I mean, Goodman and Halafai-Noa are the two guys who have stood out for the last couple of years from that kind of current, the current teenagers. They're the two superstars, and they've shown that with like NBA Global Academy stuff and New Zealand age grade stuff and et cetera, et cetera. Jackson Ball's the best one in the NBL right now. Certainly the best performing one, at least. And like, we're not speaking towards potential necessarily, but like in terms of who's doing the most right now, that's clearly Jackson Ball. But there's a lot of them. There's quite a few. There's most of that under-19 World Cup squad are playing or have played at some point of the season in the Pizza NBL.
Beauty, let's finish with a bit of a net session where I want to put the spotlight on New Zealand Day. There will be future weeks to talk about the county championship cricket, but we did have Matt Henry taking a bunch of wickets for Somerset. Jacob Duffy took a fifer for Worcestershire. Nathan Smith's doing well for Surrey. Logan Van Beek is dominating for Leicestershire in the Division 2 competition. A lot of Kiwis doing some great stuff in the County Championship Division 1, Division 2. And you still have a whole nother group. Like, think about it. So you got all the guys playing T20 cricket. Then you've got players playing county championship cricket. But then you've got a whole nother group in that New Zealand Day tour of Bangladesh that has just been wrapped up with a draw in their second unofficial test. So that draw means that the New Zealand Day cricket team is undefeated in their last 6 games. And they are 3 wins, 1 draw from their last 4 games, all of which are overseas. This does need to be balanced out, though, because the one-dayers, they've lost more. So their win in the 3rd unofficial ODI against Bangladesh was their only win from their last 9 one-dayers, I think. But they do have their fantastic record in the long form format, the unofficial test format, the first class format. And that tour is all wrapped up now. So we got a good look at the New Zealand Day team across 5 games. They lost the first 2 games of the one-day series. And, I mean, if we're using the win in the 3rd one-dayer, that means New Zealand Day are undefeated in their last 3 games of the tour. 2 wins and a draw. So that's pretty decent. The best players in the long form series were players who did something in the second game Nick Kelly, great century. Almost hit as many sixes as he did fours, which is always fun to see. I think he finished with 10 sixes in the 2 first-class games, and the next best was Joe Carter on 2 sixes. So Kelly hit 10 sixes, Carter hit 2 sixes. Carter hit a 62. Matt Boyle finally had a score. He got a 58. Ben Lister, 3 wickets. Lennox, 3 wickets. Folks took 3 wickets in the game. And this means that Kelly, leading run scorer for the long form series, 2 centuries in 2 games. After being the best batter in the Plunket Shield last summer. Joe Carter was the only other dude to hit 250s in the long form series. Mitch Hay hit a 50 in the first game. And Curtis Heafy, I think he hit his 50 in the second game as well. So Curtis Heafy played 1 game, had 1 innings, and he scored a 71. So that was good for Curtis Heafy. Jaden Lennox, leading wicket taker, 7 wickets. Then we go Ashok, 6 wickets. Clarkson, 5 wickets. Lister, 4 wickets. Christian Clark, 4 wickets. Folks, 3 wickets. As the leading bowlers in the long form series. A fun way for me to split things up was the 3 veterans, all 30 years or older in the New Zealand A team, were fantastic. Jaden Lennox and Nick Kelly played every game. I think they were the only players to play every game of this tour. Lennox, leading wicket taker in the long form series, and was the busiest bowler in the one-day series. As I said, Nick Kelly, best batter in the long form series, closely followed by, well, not closely followed by, but followed by Leo Carter. What's his name? Joe Carter. That's the one.
Joe. Big Joe.
So the 3 veterans were the best players in the long form series. But then you also had contributions from all the youngsters. So that was good to see as well. The best young bowlers for me were Aditya Ashok and Christian Clark. While Josh Clarkson obviously took some wickets as well, but I was very impressed with the Ashok-Christian Clark combination. Neither of whom played the second game. And any other batters stand out for me? Well, there's one other pocket that I do want to highlight, because Dean Foxcroft only had 150-plus score in the whole tour. But he was, what did he do? 2nd for runs in the one-dayers, and I think he was 4th for runs in the long-form game, the unofficial tests. 2nd for runs and 4th for runs for a dude who was batting 7 or 8. And when you think about their roles for the domestic teams, Dean Foxcroft had the biggest change in his role. For Otago, he's usually batting 3, 4, maybe 5. And he's a bowling option. But I think like Otago, they've got who are their spinners off the top of my head? Ben Lockrose is going to bowl more in the Super Smash. I think you've got one of the Cumming brothers. He's a leggy on the rise. There's someone else, but I can't remember because I'm just pulling Otago spin bowlers off the top of my head. You're going to throw someone at me?
Well, I almost said Michael Rippon, but then I remembered he left, so it's not him.
Yep, he's for Canterbury.
Maybe it's Dean Foxcroft from now on.
It is Dean Foxcroft, because Dean Foxcroft played all of his games on this tour as a spin bowling all-rounder. And again, he was 2nd for runs in the one day, as 4th for runs in the long form games. In the long form games, he only took 1 wicket at an average of 124, but he bowled in 3 innings. The only dude who bowled in all 4 innings was Jaden Lennox, and then No one else bowled in 3 innings except for Foxcroft. But in the one-dayers, Foxcroft took 3 wickets at an average of 19. Ashok and Clark took 4 wickets each, but Foxcroft had a lower average. So in this tour, he was playing as the third spinner behind Jaden Lennox and Aditya Ashok. You also had Dale Phillips bowling spin, Matt Boyle bowling spin. There are other dudes adding overs into the mix. But I was very impressed with Dean Foxcroft, doing, being open to a different role, batting down the order, more of an all-rounder, and then B, doing pretty well in that role. And as I said last time, I think that's the role that is going to have the most opportunities for him at the higher level. Everything else is kind of like Nick Kelly. He played ODIs for the Black Caps last summer. Joe Carter, does he have Black Caps potential? Maybe. But I don't know why the Black Caps would select him ahead of a Reese Mariu. Reese Mariu didn't have a great tour, but that's right. Development exercise. Reese Mariu, Matt Boyle, Curtis Heafy, they have more upside than Joe Carter. So then it's more like situation. Joe Carter's a good plug-and-play batter to put into a team if they just need to cover an absence. But if you're trying to develop Black Caps, I think you're better off going in the Reese Mariu, Matt Boyle, Curtis Heafy direction. Although Nick Kelly has just scored so many runs that I don't think the situation really matters for him. And he's a bit more free-flowing, a bit more attacking. Whether it's the sixes, whether it's the razzle-dazzle shots, he has the capacity to be very aggressive, and he's a lefty as well. So he's already played for the Black Caps, and I think he's going to have more opportunities. Who else with batters? Mitch Hay, already a wicketkeeper for the Black Caps. Dean Foxcroft has already played for the Black Caps, and I think he can return to that equation. Josh Clarkson has made his debut in recent years. He could be a decent all-rounder, but I think he's kind of behind he's behind Nathan Smith in that category. Christian Clark. Always talk about Christian Clark because he's very impressive for Northern Districts and now New Zealand A. He is still down the pecking order a wee bit. Like the bowlers, Fox has played for the Black Caps, Ashok's played for the Black Caps, Lister's played for the Black Caps, Clarkson's played for the Black Caps, Muhammad Abbas, he's played for the Black Caps. With their skill sets, so Clarkson all-rounder, Muhammad Abbas all-rounder, they're obviously ahead of Christian Clark. But Christian Clark, he takes wickets. And to be honest, he scores a few runs as well. He's probably behind Josh Clarkson in that all-rounder category. And depending on conditions, they might be both behind Dean Foxcroft. If it's a spinning deck or a seaming deck, we'll see what happens. There was, and just the way they played is something noteworthy as well. The catching, excellent catching. You could see just the reactions to their catches. This is some shit that Bangladeshis haven't seen before, you know? I'm kind of taking the piss, but I'm kind of not. Because these dudes are taking great catches all the time, and they're playing again. They're playing like a Kiwi cricket team, which is always good to see. And they're all having fun. Like some of these dudes have played for the Black Caps, but they're ripping in for New Zealand A when they get that opportunity as well, which is quite impressive. Good mixture of veterans and emerging talent, like guys at different levels in the New Zealand cricket pipeline. And the conditions are tough conditions. It's probably pretty humid. You're in Bangladesh, so it's more spinny. So it's a very good learning opportunity. So I'm not mad when Muhammad Abbas averages 9.5 and 3.5 with the bat. Like, I'm not mad when Reece Mariu averages 11 and 37. That's all right. Kelly, he averaged 11 in the one-dayers. Carter averaged 23 in the one-dayers. Curtis Heafy scored 15 runs in his 2 one-day appearances. Then he scored 71 in his 1 long-form appearance. What does all that mean? Because there's a few other notes like that around. To me, it's about learning and development. And these guys, some dudes had good tours, some dudes had mediocre tours, some dudes had good performances. Others were inconsistent, but they won a game. They won 2 games of the whole tour. Most of them showed what they are capable of, and they did all that in pretty tricky conditions. And I think it's a very useful development exercise for New Zealand cricket, especially because the New Zealand A games before this were in New Zealand versus Australia, then in Australia. So you didn't really get the development of going to opposite conditions and playing good cricket as they did in Bangladesh.
Yeah, and there's likely to be, a few of these guys from this team who go back to Bangladesh one day with the main Black Caps, and when that happens, it's all just, the road's going to be just a little bit clearer for them because they've been there before and done a little bit of that, and maybe even have a bit of confidence from having scored some runs and taken some wickets there. But even if they didn't, then they're still at least got the, they're not going in blind. They will still respect the darkness, but they're not going to be in the darkness for that particular, thanks to this particular experience. So yeah, good stuff. And especially because they got results too. And they got results from listening to what you're saying. Like Nick Kelly getting a couple centuries there is nice. Like him scoring big runs in the end of it there. But it really sounds like there was a pretty broad range of contributors there throughout what was only like a 15-player traveling squad for both formats together. Like, that's not a huge group, and there's not a whole, like, the max you can make between one game and the next is 4 changes, and they more or less did that, but you're still going to have the bulk of your squad backing up each single time. So yeah, it seems like there was seems like the load was shared quite nicely there. A lot of runs and wickets across the board, where not too many people are going out there and doing everything, but everyone's doing a little bit, which again is like it's another one of those Kiwi cricket ways to play, isn't it? Like, you do your job, chip in. If it's your day, you might go on and get something big, but at the very least, you're giving something positive back to the team. You're doing your bit, and that all adds up towards being able to win games of cricket.
Indeed, it does. And we will wrap our podcast up there. Big up yourself. We keep it moving forward. The weekend of Mount Smart doom and gloom is behind us, and we keep looking forward towards the light. So big up yourself. Have a crack today. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Church.